I know it's less audience, but very valuable audience. Thank you very much for being with us now. Thank.
They're cooking pizza over there, so they stole the soup.
Yeah, all right. It's not good to cook pizza at the same time when we have a presentation afternoon. All right, thank you very much indeed, and I hope the coming 30 minutes or less more will be valuable moments for you, everyone. And thank you very much for the coordinator. Thank you for the people behind the scenes. Thank you very much indeed. And let's talk a little about climate change and foodborne diseases. So now, everyone knows that in the coming days, UAE will hold a very big event, which is the COP, and the focus on is the climate change. And for us, as we are having such a great exhibition now, we need to focus and we need to remember the food safety. And as you know, as the climate change affects more, we will have more problems and more concerns about food safety. So to cover this topic, first let's talk about what does climate change mean. Climate change in simple words, it's how those gases can affect the world, can affect the global. Those gases which they are trapped by the atmosphere, they affect our Earth. Now, the other thing we need to know, by the way, this is the definition of the Food and Agriculture Organization, which is our focus now. We need to focus on food. So the other definition is about how WHO defined the foodborne diseases. So it's important for us to understand what a foodborne disease means. And it says that foodborne diseases are caused by ingesting or by having contaminated food or water or drinks, which it goes through the whole food chain, starting from the farm up to our table where we consume our food in home or at restaurants. So how we can link the climate change to the foodborne diseases? Now, the climate change, these changes in the temperature, which you know, the climate change mainly, it affects the rise of the temperature. So every year, the scientists, they know that there is a rise, or they notice a rise in the temperatures in the whole globe. And that affects our whole globe. There are incidents of rise in temperatures, humidity, rainfall. Even in the UAE, we started to notice an odd rainfall sometimes. So all of this affect the safety of our food. So even the extreme weather events, I remember last year in Fujairah, we have floodings here in UAE, which affects, the water gets inside the food businesses. And if it affects hardly and toughly those people who work in the food businesses. So we need to consider that climate change affects our food in different ways. Now, there is an important thing we need to consider, that it affects the occurrence of the foodborne disease. That means how much likely it happens. It happens more and more, plus the severity. And severity means how hard, how tough it affects our health. Let's watch this video, which was published by the Food and Agriculture Organization from the United Nations, to highlight the effect of climate change on food safety. So it's very clear that those organizations are taking the initiative to consider the effect of climate change on food safety and how it's hardly affect our food. Now, there are many factors which play a role in this change of the climate change, in this temperature when they rise, in the rainfall, extreme rainfall, in the floodings. And one of the effects is, as an example, the spread of diseases carried by some insects. So as we have these changes in different places in the whole world, we need to expect more diseases. So we need to have, as the Food and Agriculture Organization says, we need to have a proactive approach. We need to consider this. We need to consider that we are going to fight back such diseases. And as you know, some industries will be affected more by such diseases, by such transmissions. Example, the water industry. If we are not taking the most important reactions and corrective actions to protect the water industry from such invasion, from such insects, we would be in trouble. So this is the role of the government authorities and the third parties to have a very good audit, very good inspection of the food businesses, so they can proactively protect us as consumers from such diseases. So the role is not only in the food businesses, the inspection bodies have a role, have role as well in preventing these diseases. Another thing, I know we have speakers in the earlier who talks about the animals and about the feed of the animals. So it's clear in the image in front of you, when we have such climate changes, how it affects those animals. And the problem here that we have common diseases between animals and between us, between the humans. And these diseases will hit hardly when we have these floodings. And this is example in front of you. So we need to be careful and proactive to such invasions and such incidents. Another example, EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, has announced about the increase of the climate change events is expected to have an impact on the presence of aflatoxins in food in Europe. And for those who are not specialized in food safety, those toxins are really very harmful. It might reach with high levels in the food. It might reach to a point where they kill humans. It's clear that we need to take actions and immediate actions for the climate change. Another example, another chart, where also we can see the effect from 2014 to 2019, how it increases for the severe food insecurity, the orange line, where the blue line is less dangerous ones, the moderate to severe food insecurity, but also we have an increase on this graph. Now, what foodborne disease for us, what it means for us? So to understand the impact of the climate change on the food safety, we need to understand what are these foodborne diseases. Foodborne diseases, those diseases which transmitted by food to us. So while we are trying to enjoy our meals, we are at risk sometimes if food safety not considered. And this image in front of you actually is linked to an outbreak took place in 2017 in South Africa, where some people decided to enjoy meals of cold meat. Unfortunately, in this outbreak, which linked to a pathogen called listeria, 2016 people died. They just wanted to enjoy their meal, their food. It's not only about the people who died, it's also about the people who survived. This lady in front of you, she ate from that food, and that was the result. She lost her vision, she can't hear anymore, and she gets disabled. She's still alive. So this is very serious. We need to take care when we are talking about food safety. Yeah, we are enjoying the food, and all the time we need to enjoy the food, but also there are some important factors we need to consider. So the problem that the climate change is increasing the probability of such foodborne diseases unless we take the necessary precautions. So, do you think we have roles as food safety managers in the food businesses? Do we have a role? Can we fight back? Yes, we can. Yes, we have to. So, one of the important things the food safety managers in the food businesses, first we need to know in UAE, the law enforces the food businesses to have food safety managers in place, to have people who takes care of the food safety. And the good news as well that in UAE, in all of the Emirates, we have training programs. So it's not a coincidence that we have very less outbreaks in the country, but because we have very good programs in the country as well with regard to the food safety. Now the risk is still there. Because of that, I'm speaking here. The risk is still there, and the role on the food safety managers is extremely important. One of the important responsibilities of the food safety managers is to understand the relationship between the increase of the temperature with regard to the safety of the food. As an example, majority of the pathogens will be killed by normal cooking temperatures. And we are really lucky of this. So when we have thorough cooking of our food, we can kill majority of the pathogens. Unfortunately, some pathogens or toxins might survive the high temperature, the cooking temperature. So those toxins might be present even after we cook the food. So this have to be understood by the food safety managers. The good news that we have other control measures to control such toxins if the food safety managers consider that. Example, we have something called the ultra heat temperature. So for some products, if you notice in the markets, we have some of types of the milk, we keep it out of the fridge, just in the normal temperature. So that's because we have increased the temperature of the cooking to 121 degrees centigrade. So all of these shall be understood by the food safety manager. So as the temperature increases, the risk increases, the awareness is more important. Now, also, we need to consider in the time of the incidents related to the climate change, we might have a risk of power outages. And that is critical because some food needs to be chilled, needs to be frozen, right? I know one of the businesses, it's a factory, and they have huge chillers. And it happened once, actually they store meat, the raw meat. And it happened once, which is very rare in the country, we are lucky with that, but it happened once that the power was outage. Power stopped. I know the owner, he's my friend. He said, Shall we wait a minute? Can you hear me well, guys? Shall I continue? All right, we are good now. So, he told me at that time I had no worries because he was prepared for that. He has the, what do you call it, the generator. He has a big generator, a huge generator to work in such crisis. It's rare where this happened. Now, when the operations manager gave the orders to the maintenance team, to the engineering department, to start on the generator, it didn't work. It was out of fuel. Now, because the people did not think a lot, did not have really good plans to such incidents. Even the management, they thought they are ready for such things, but because of lack of action planning, they have a big problem at that time. So the food safety managers, they need to understand the impact, and they really need to be well prepared for such an incident. Also, the communication. One of the problems we have a lot in the food businesses is the communication between the food safety department or the quality departments and the operations department. So also good communication, good awareness, good training for the staff is really very important. Also investing in technology. Now, sometimes we go to food businesses and we are happy that they have good chilling system, they have good fridge, but the question sometimes is about the supply chain. So sometimes a lot, we import food from outside the country. Example, we import fish from Oman. And the question is, what happens while the fish is transporting to here? Were they controlling the temperature in their journey? So when we invest in the technology to observe, to monitor the temperature overall the whole journey from the country where they export to here to UAE is extremely important. We need to understand before we accept the food into our businesses, how was the status of the food during the journey. Consider if the journey was in the sea. 2 months, shipment of 2 months from a country to another country. What is going on during the transportation? This is an extremely important question we need to answer. All right. The last thing I'd like to highlight after we hopefully understand the impact of the climate change and the food safety, what strategies we can have to overcome such a huge risk we might have. So the first thing the food businesses need to understand that the focus should be to buy the food from sustainable sourcing, from sustainable farms, from sustainable industry, from sustainable manufacturer. That will help a lot in protecting our food. Another strategy is about energy efficiency. So we need to use the energy efficiency methods and approaches in our food businesses. So example, when we store the food or the machines we are using, you know, this is very used. I think, you know, the chillers, they have such an indicator, such an indicator where we have the energy efficiency that will help us in choosing the fridge, the chillers, the equipment in our food businesses as well. One more thing is about the water conservation. Actually, in TSI, we are working closely with the government. So I myself sometimes go with gap analysis visits to the food businesses, and I notice a lot in too many businesses, still they are using the manual tab for the running water, to wash their hands, to wash the pots, to do all the activities, all the operations. And that's a loss of the water. I believe if they calculated it from business perspective, they will consider having a sensor water taps rather than have the normal taps. Plus, that it affects the food safety, because sometimes the food handlers, what they are doing, they open the tap to wash their hands, and when they finish washing their hands, they close again the tap, right? So it works in both sides. So we need to consider that it helps the globe, it helps the earth to save more water, plus it plays a very important role with regard to food safety. And plus, this is very well known, the waste reduction by reducing, reusing, recycling, and composition organic waste. We need to encourage the food business. I know very well that there are many businesses here in Abu Dhabi, in UAE, that they are using these strategies. And I know there are a lot of certification of third parties, which they are doing something like this. So that's some coverage about this important topic. I hope it will help us to improve or to fight back about the climate change, including the menus we are choosing, which menus we would choose. The food businesses have a role about this. We as consumers have a role about this, to choose let's say the menus which is adapt the climate resilience food in the whole globe. As a conclusion, if we need to recap, climate change affects our food. It's not only the availability of the food, but also the food safety. So the food we take, the food we eat, it might be at risk. So we need to work together to fight back against the climate change.